Welcome to News Breaking News, a spin-off segment of the almost daily ZenCast, hosted by me, the same guy, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. This is part 2 of today's broadcast. Part 1 was called, "What is the Trumptopian Agenda Really?" Let's get started with today's, with this segment's focus. How do we respond? Hello and namaste, and thank you for listening. So earlier, I rambled about what I think the Trumptopia agenda is at its core. And like I said, setting aside all the extreme theories and ignoring Russia for now, what are the 3 most powerful men in American government actually doing? They are stripping down the structures of government without having in place and ready to go into action any kind of replacement plan. And it seems like out of fear or some really insanely inflated sense of allegiance to the glorious leader of this cult of personality problem that we're having in government, the GOP seems to be manifesting that exact same tactic with the repeal and not replacing of Obamacare. I've already rambled about that too. What is our response? At first, let's take a moment and applaud and support everyone who has manifested protests from day one. That alone is a massive feat of a public display of, non-support. I do not condone the activities so far of this collection of people in governance. And I hear from all sides crazy and interesting theories bordering on the conspiracy-driven about the protests being artificial, being paid for, bought and paid for by super-rich people, etc. And acknowledging that some of that might be, some percentage of that might be happening somewhere. The way, less than 1% of 1% of voter fraud that the Republicans claim is happening does happen. But the rest, they're really sort of also inflating it like crazy and making a big to-do. That's not the main point. My main point is organization and collaboration at a community-wide, statewide, nationwide level of what our intent is next. That's the moral imperative of our day. One of. Another moral imperative of our day I've posed before in a previous meme, which I don't think I've rambled at about this in this podcast format, but I've posted a meme that says the moral obligation of our generation is to sit down and meditate harder and get others around us to meditate also. Okay, that's crazy hippie new age woo-woo talk, right? But let's take a look at why. The hippie new age woo-woo discreditation or attempt at debunking genuine meditative practice is foolhardy because it's based on a misrepresentation or an angling and a misuse of scientific fact and history. And it's part of it. It is evidence of the parroting of the oppressive regime's system-wide or kind of nationwide, global-wide attempt for centuries now to indoctrinate the vast, quote-unquote, unwashed masses, that this sort of thing is ineffective and ineffectual. In other words, it's impotent in pragmatic terms of getting anything done. I say that's one of the oldest lies, engendered and propagated and supported by the oppressive system. Not Trump himself, probably directly. He may or may not have spent much time thinking about that. But those who engineered the profiteering mechanism of keeping us distracted and complacent and engaged enough in a sort of mundane, ordinary life that keeps us busy and occupied and valuable in terms of being work capital and, livestock capital, because the more people are participating in this imaginary profiteer-driven social system we call the global economy, the more the profiteers can profiteer. So whatever you think is going on, you can deduce quite logically and pragmatically, just from observing the world to the best of your ability with the tools that you have at your disposal, that whoever is in charge of this thing we call postmodern society, they do not have our best interests at play, and you can clearly see in history sort of a flaunting of the purposeful, willful marginalization and neglecting of by the people of spiritual matters and concerns, addressing or evoking or manifesting individual progress towards the liberation of one's mind from all ideology, which leads towards a communion with the spiritual process of choosing ascension and enlightenment, and therefore contributing towards the species-wide development and advancement up that path. To keep us here is to keep themselves well profiteering. Conversely, just like there's that cartoon by a wonderfully expressive and yet very simple and direct, very genius newspaper comic artist, cartoonist, whose name completely escapes me because this just came as the image. I saw the image. I think I've meme quoted it before. And if not, I probably will in the future. I probably have it lined up somewhere in some forgotten folder of things I wanted to meme quote, and I haven't gotten around to doing it. And that's that we forget that we, the people, have the power by sheer volume. We have real power that no matter what statist or non-statist, political, ideological, religious philosophy you want to cling to, that collectively we are all humans, and we are all here on this earth, and we all have the power to take action and to express our voice and to have a conversation independent of whatever authority figures are dictating down from on high what is and is not reality, what is or is not allowable, what is or is not appropriate in our political thing. And that with critical independent thinking, we can, in that capacity, as independent people, build consensus on the idea that about what, and investigate for ourselves the idea of whether or not there is a spiritual process we can embark upon that will make pragmatic change be manifest over time, vis-a-vis the healing of those who are greedy and corrupt and in power and fear-mongering. Where's the evidence? Well, it is intellectually easy to point to mind control when you talk about it in negative terms, isn't it? Propaganda from other eras, from other countries, becomes sort of self-explanatory once you get some historical perspective. And you do not live under the oppressive regime of that propaganda or that collection of propaganda devices operating on you. So when we look at propaganda from other countries and other periods of time, it's laughable how, like, oh, wow, they're clearly trying to influence the way these people perceive their reality. And therefore, how they make judgments about what to do next. And this is something we need addressed at the national level, at the global level. Because if, and I know this is a big if a mystic configuration or thesis of what's going on and how the world operates and how we can solve things is accurate, functionally, and we can investigate that and render results. Why aren't we doing it? The people who aren't doing it are satisfied with that's just hippie, new age, woo nonsense explanation why we shouldn't do it. Think about that for a hot minute. If you're one of those who has previously swept aside strange esoteric practices like energy healing or distance healing or whatever, and I know con artists are con artists, and it's easy to get lost in saying, well, this con artist and that con artist, etc. We're just shamming people on their belief. But it's also easy to ignore or forget that the placebo effect is something that science has for decades now, investigated and continually verified is true. We just kind of conveniently don't get reminded about it very much. The placebo effect. What does that have to do with Trumptopian politics in this freaky era that we live in? The placebo is simple. It's deceptively simple, just like E equals MC squared is simple. It is a testable, repeatable, verifiable scientific thesis, which is bordering on what humans foolishly call laws, which we shouldn't call them laws because it's more like programming, which is live and that we can alter by thinking about it, contemplating it, and choosing what to call it. But science is, as for most of our lifetimes, been able to render a result that is statistically meaningful, but doesn't conclusively, hands down, prove that we can conduct magic. You know, it's statistically meaningful as evidence towards belief somehow has something to do with what the outcome is. If you take a placebo drug and you believe it's the real medicine, the real chemical drug, you sometimes your body renders a result that is equivalent to and results in your healing. Imagine if we understood the placebo effect deeply, where instead of it being something that you sort of hear about once or twice but is often dismissed by bombast, it was, a leading forefront of science and medical technology research, along with meditation and long-distance healing or energy work. There's evidence in every religion, from Rumi as an example of, Sufi contemplative thought, Buddha, Jesus, and I say this is a theme, I say this all the time. If you dig deep and think critically for yourself about any religion and look at the historical facts and what you can find that is verifiable statement by the individual that is historically remembered as the founding prophet, claiming to be the son of God or in some way in some communion with God, some of them fall by the wayside and can't pass the bullshit test because they were con artists outright in their own times, and those people are long forgotten. But others, including a large list of people whose names are also long forgotten, gee, I wonder why, all their stories correlate, and all their statements correlate and support each other. And there is, when you honestly investigate and compare and contrast the core teachings of Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Mithra, etc., all these guys that follow the Son of God paradigm, especially if they really hit high marks on the biography of, born of a virgin, etc. These people were living embodiments of archetype that exists, that is a part of the human species, and that is our birthright as individuals, that any of us can eventually achieve that. We have labeled it in the spiritual community Christ consciousness and other names from various cultures. It doesn't matter what it's called. There is a next level or a series of next levels, and we've been indoctrinated to ignore it, so that people like Donald Trump and Rex Tillingham, that name I explained earlier always wants to fall out of my head because I want to call him Rex Harrison from not Princess Bride, but from Dr. Dolittle and that other musical. Anyways, these folks themselves are deeply caught up in a disease that we don't have a real good name for, that ancient cultures do, and that ancient cultures warned us about on a bunch of different ways, that Jesus warned us about. And that we just have to dig a little bit deeper into their mystic teachings and what those mystic teachings really mean or might mean, to sort of build a framework that in theory, I'm not asking you to blindly believe what I'm saying. I'm asking you to participate, or to let's engender a culture of investigating this scientifically and socially as an experiment. And that's that we have the capacity to heal ourselves and heal each other, and that we should be doing that. We should be doing that for free, not having endless and expensive. Where did all that money go, and who pocketed it in the end? Because just the issuance of the proclamations and the voting procedures and all the marketing thrown around it, and all the secondary and tertiary sort of hangers on. There's a whole market of crazy bullshit industries that cling onto and leech onto the political process and spend and generate mountains of money. Where does it all go? Who keeps it all? Where does it trickle? Does it trickle down? It supposedly creates jobs. Who has those jobs? And why aren't we being represented? Let's go ahead and call it the hippie new age woo-woo political party. Why aren't light workers, spiritual healers, energy workers, Christ consciousness teachers, those who understand the toroidal pattern of the cosmos and have some label of self-identification and have a stronger capacity to build consensus because we're coming at it from a point of compassion, why aren't we nominating from amongst ourselves trustworthy, reliable healers to participate in this grossly corrupted public political arena of ideological battle? If we understand that the cosmos is in fact a battleground lesson plan of overcoming all ideologies in order to perceive the universe accurately and therefore recall or otherwise learn new esoteric levels of the universe's function that we are as of yet not participating in. And there's hundreds of thousands of us from what I understand. There's a bunch of you on Instagram accounts posting the same sort of stuff. Unless all of you are a psyop to make me feel special and on the right path and to keep me crazy and busy in my house instead of working at McDonald's and paying taxes and, paying to become an American citizen so that I can pay to have the privilege to vote for my freedoms. No offense, but that's sort of my form of political protest. I'll become an American citizen, and I know people are going to freak out who don't realize that I'm not an American citizen. I have a green and perfectly real and perfectly legal green card. Very pink, actually, because it's not green anymore. It used to be green. Then it was very pink for a long time. Now it's sort of multicolored and official, very cyber techy. Which the NSA is probably listening to my conversations about spirituality that I have while this shit sits in my wallet. So I don't even have to have this silly podcast show. So I'll join the voting practice because I have been, even if I was a full natural born, because I could have been. My parents could have moved before I was born. And I could have been born here and had, natural born citizenship. Which is the only thing that distinguishes you Americans that hate your immigrants from immigrants, because most of those people, their parents originated down family trees of immigration. Once we can agree that we can only politically organize and fix the corruption of the political organizational structures of our country, once we choose a new set of bare minimal, functional things that we want to make required. And I think compassion and comprehension and an absence of oligarchic, profiteering, kleptocratic practices that are, crony capitalism made manifest at its worst. If we can identify and agree upon that ego is the problem, no matter what religion you believe in, ego is the cosmic problem. And we can't fight that with wars, because people still grow up with injured egos that then over-retaliate in their adulthood when they have leverage and power and means to do so. And that's true of everybody in every position, from the most humble homeless man to the most maniacal, dark-moneyed, super rich person that we don't even know the name of. They're a human being, and they have ego construct. And those of us who already think and already believe with capital, all caps, believe. In other words, as practice as a tool of manifestation and a choice, not a blindly subscribed to blind faith sort of tolemic or dogmatic ideological construct. Choose to believe in this sort of interactive holographic description of reality, then it is our moral duty to sit down and do the distance energy healing work, not just on our clients, if we have any, if we run a spiritual business that way, but on those who are the most corrupt, the signifiers, those most ugly, ego-driven mirrors that live public lives in order to either induce fear, promote indoctrination that keep us distracted and away from enlightenment process. We should be healing them. I humbly submit to you that in order to compete with the loudmouth, crazy, hate-mongering media types out there, the extreme right wing, the alt-right media platforms that engender hate, engender division, engender fear, and perpetuate all kinds of obvious variations on mind control indoctrination systems that are about preventing enlightenment, then we should be stepping it up. All of us crazy hippie new age woo-woo, and maybe trying to validate and prove our point that with more involvement, more engagement, and emerging with those who are doing so at the political level and the pragmatic level out in the streets, and combining those practices. For example, let's organize a political rally protest that is an intense congregational, like it's a community building, it's a collection of of the grassroots, where we indulge in silent meditative practice as protest in huge, in the Washington Mall. Do we want to affect change? Where we make a specific speech about our intention to heal and transform those in corrupt power, and to let them know that we understand and that we acknowledge their humanity, and we hold them accountable for their practical, political, pragmatic crimes, as well as their spiritual transgressions. Because at a certain point, choosing ego and profiteering and money and the dark side and the ego trap overtly and consciously becomes a moral failing that needs to be, confronted externally and internally. And that person has to fight a spiritual battle to win their own agency back. And that's the way it is. When you crack the code behind the way the Bible tried to capture esoteric information and the truth about that and other religions, I hear people always ask links and references and evidence and proof. Look at Stan Tenon's work. He decodes the opening segments of the book of Genesis in a studious, scientifically rigorous, mathematical way that renders a very fascinating reading and resulting in new data. And guess what? It confirms and connects with and affirms and correlates with spiritual claims from around the world, from ancient mystic societies and secret occult organizations that have long been oppressed and marginalized and tried to obliterated from the pop cultural mentality. Why? Because understanding these things, if the population understood these things, the majority of the human population understood these things, and practice some transcendent new practice, all of us together, we would transcend our political problems. Instead of denying it without having ever tried it, we've never tried that. We've only tried it very marginally, and in some cases with historical evidence for winning. Arguably, Mahatma Gandhi is a great example. You can try to lay all kinds of critique at his feet and all kinds of character assassination from all kinds of sources at his feet. For those of you who have a anti-Mahatma Gandhi fetish, for those of you who are just intimately, just have a fandom and know Mahatma Gandhi's life, plenty of claims have been laid against him. And all human beings have faults. And I'm not officially positing him or proposing him for sainthood. I think he may have been approaching ascended master status, but I don't know if he got there or not. He didn't fulfill some of the other sort of archetypical requirements, but I'm not here to debate that at this time, right? But if you look around, there is evidence. We've just been told to dismiss it. And we do. We throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because the indoctrination, the anti-Enlightenment indoctrination is strong and old and deep. And people like Donald Trump and Steve Bannon and Rex Tillerson were not immune to that same indoctrination. They are a direct rendering or result of it. And that is their disease. And we, who believe we have the power to cumulatively, together, contribute towards their healing, ought to be stepping that up a notch. And those of you out there listening who might be curious enough to wonder if maybe this theory might be correct, are welcome to join in participating in those activities. The awesomest part, my friends, at this resistance can happen in the privacy of your own home, in the safety of your own bedroom, without worrying about whether or not it offends other members of your family or other members of your community and their religious viewpoint. Because one of the saving and very interestingly curious details, saving grace details, about proposing meditation in its simplest sense, in its largest sense, in its most magical sense, is that all the prophets did so already. If you really look, Jesus made statements that very clearly promote or support the claim for a meditation enlightenment. My favorite to point to people who are like, no, and there's a knee-jerk response. There's a knee-jerk response, even from casual Christians, just because it's a little radical sounding. For the following quote, which is a meme that I hope is floating around out there that I created a while back, that someone else was already sharing the base image of, which is a sort of cool paper, like background, kind of old-timey, like it's papyrus or something. And it's a picture of kind of stern-faced Jesus, very Anglo-Saxon looking, which is unfortunate, because I believe the man, Jesus Christ, did not look like he was from Northern Europe and contended with snow half of his year, okay? He just didn't. He looked like someone deep from the Middle East and who traveled to India and might have had Indian roots, by the way. But that's a whole nother episode because I need to go and that's one where I need to gather some things because people are going to trip. But this, you can crack open your Bible. Or if you don't have one at hand or you're too lazy to go dig it up, you can click open BibleGateway.com and look at it in the King James Version and a bunch of different versions. He says, and I quote, I try to quote, I might butcher it. The eye of the body is light. So if thine eyes be single, thy body shall be manifest light, or full of light, or infused with light, or, in other words, made up of light. I may have not gotten the exact phrasing right, for example, out of King James, but I know that it's there. Unless the strange Mandela effect is happening and listeners are looking up that Bible passage and it doesn't exist. I would love to hear from you folks if that is the case. But it should be there. It's there. I refuse to believe in the Mandela effect. I think it's a psyop to try to confuse people who are too lazy to go do fact-checking. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. But what I am very confident on, because it's not new to me, and it's been a constant theme in my completely admittedly hobbyist enthusiast, but very enthusiastic research into the roots of spirituality and the roots of organized religion. Throughout time, true and genuine men and women, it should be noted, who can be considered genuinely qualified to be considered and held up as prophets of some sort of divine spiritual messaging, constantly spoke of meditation and the notion that that which we call God is within us more so than outside of us, and that we are one with it. We are just living out the phenomena of being under a very, very persistent illusion of not being one with it for the purposes of choosing transcendent and healing love, which is the primary unit or work measure, like work step. You know, the measurable action unit. There we go. That's the phrasing. The measurable action unit for building not an ideology, but a practice, which is something completely different than an ideology. For those who do not understand the distinction I just made, no judgments. Send you love and energy. I'm not trying to make you feel small or unintelligent. We don't know because this is the kind of stuff that's crammed down our throats without a proper explanation. That's how indoctrination works. But an ideology is a set of rules made up by man using logic and reasoning, which may sound like a very plausible description of the way reality works, but is in fact just an idea of some given individual about how it might work. And that's not just what some might dismiss as wordplay or wordsmithing. That's a very significant distinction to be made. Because we can, what is the history of ideology categorically shown us? And it cannot be objectively debunked or denied, this following statement. Ideologies lead to conflict over and between different factions of people who cling to different ideologies. And if those conflicts then render themselves profitable for the profiteering class, they will then be capitalized on and utilized as excuses for war. Okay? Because that's their biggest gangbuster profiteer like system, product, installment plan. It costs us our innocent lives, people who don't really understand the ideology that they're dying for and killing for, go off to war and die. And no matter what you think or what political end of the point on the spectrum you come from, that is an inherent part of the Trumptopian agenda. Because in one way or another, no president in this postmodern era is really different from any other president. Because there is, in fact, a deep structural shadow state or shadow government, or just call it something else that's less conspiratorial. There is a deep-seated influence and a tendency towards engaging in promoting, sustaining, contained conflict that we can send boots on the ground and bombs in the air to, because that entire process is something that the profiteer class is deeply personally addicted to, and therefore has spent a lot of time and energy and effort and money on trying to engender an addiction in all of us too. That explains the socio-maniacal, self-contradicting culture of gun-loving Christians. And I don't mean to be critical there. I'm inviting you with love and respect to question your beliefs if you call yourself a Christian and also love machines of death. Because Jesus is shaking his head in serious disappointment at you. Okay? He didn't say, go ahead and buy swords and then go kill people sometimes on my name, on my behalf, because I ask you to, or some preacher says so in my name. He did not say that. He said, yeah, it's okay to own implements of self-defense. But when it comes to the act of butchering each other, you need to turn your swords into plowshares. And by the practice of choosing pacifism and risking your life, yes, you will, A, transcend the need for conflict and provide for the health and well-being of your people, because at the most fundamental and real pragmatic level, the most important thing any of us are doing is farming. We treat farmers like shit, okay? And Trump is going to be no different. The Trumptopian agenda does not really include any kind of relief or justice or personal improvement in the quality of life for America's farmers. Because if it did, we'd see some positive growth in that department. It's going to be all about allowing corporate interests that have hijacked the national food system. The national food system used to be the farm down the road from you. Okay? And that was a bazillion times healthier than anything we eat now. But we're bound by it. I was talking with someone who does meditate and says, they lose a lot of friends because they talk about that, and they still sometimes have to eat Jack in the Box. It's designed to be a slippery slope that's really hard to get out of. And we can't all suddenly drop everything and become farmers because the learning curve's a bitch. But we can inoculate, re-indoctrinate, and sort of transform all the systems that exist right now from within. But that requires a mental revolution that begins with you and I agreeing to organize. You and I, because see, there's another axiom that comes down from the ancients that I endorse and trying to find a catchy phrasing for that I think is true. None of us are awake. Even Christ consciousness, Jesus Christ himself, no offense, and I might be losing Christian Zenists or Christian people who are open-minded to Buddhist thinking or Buddhist stuff. But I don't even think Jesus was fully awake yet. Because I think that the end result of the complete process of awakening is becoming that which is born outside of this egg construct that is the universe. And there's multiple layers inside of this egg construct. If you don't know what I'm referencing, I conveniently have already curated a list, and I reference this all the time. There's no connection with me and those who made it. I don't know who made them, and no one's paying me to do so. I just think that they sort of indelibly give you the truth. They speak a deep truth. It's based on a short story, and they're true to that short story's word, and that short story is succinct and deeply, deeply true. I believe in it, in its truthiness, because at a certain point or another, I had a deep experience during my meditation practice, which rendered something, a phenomenological experience to me that I cannot describe, other than to summarize and saying it came as really intense, not just confirmation or evidence, but proof of the kind of thing that I'm saying is correct. And that the kind of thing I'm saying is all caps true in terms of, not because I know better than anybody else, but because it's what's actually happening. And every one of us has the birthright to rediscover how to access that directly. And think about it. Think it through. If every human being on the planet could access a higher consciousness, however we discover it to be, a higher awareness, a divine way of being and thinking, maybe with still these body envelopes, maybe without them, would we need to go to war anymore? No. Because here's one of the places where, see, mythos and religions are always full of lies. Just like Trump. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The scary thing about Trump is that he mixes the truth in with big, huge, very plausible sounding lies. It's not new. It's systemic, and it's a root tool of the profiteers, because nothing sells a con job better than truth wrapped up in plausible lies. It seduces the ego of everyone who buys into it so beautifully. And I'm not saying that to put anyone down. We have to understand what's going on, and I'm proposing a model of what's going on, right? And a model of what we can be doing in response to it, which is working the light side. If what I'm attempting to describe is an operating model of the dark side as it is expressing itself through this oppressive regime of puppet regimes, right? Let's remember, the buck doesn't stop with Trump. It doesn't stop with Brennan or Tillerson or any of those guys that are controlling or manipulating or influencing Trump. It doesn't stop with Putin. It goes way beyond that. So, okay, they're doing that. They are manifesting all the tools of ego in this world that is designed to seduce all of us to fall into the pitfalls of ego. But that will render a miserable place to live in. And some people are arguing that the counterbalance to that, the way to escape that, to avoid it, it's not escapism, it's not avoiding, it's to head on. Instead of charging with bloodied weapons into more war, in order to try to cut Hydra's head off, which you can't ever finish doing because it exponentially grows and manifests new participants of Hydra has died. We're rushing into the maw of Hydra's face and showing Hydra that it is just a sick and corrupt and foul and stinky illusion, and that it too can transcend itself, and that it too can heal and reintegrate itself with the light. As I've said before, the light and the dark are not enemies here to destroy each other. They are spiritual, energetic, metaconstructual twins that are bound to each other at their core, and are here to clash in this drama of the body puppet, of the living, breathing, material reality as entity with entities within it that have entities within them, and to resonate in a deep way, in a deep, big, huge, big picture way, with the overwhelming choice to operate from a core, fundamental comprehension of unconditional love energy. So let's start organizing about that. Let's start showing up to other people's standard, normal, everyday, statist, plebeian, unenlightened political protests, and welcome them to join us in our little project of infusing those protests, those afternoon-long, day-long events, with meditative practices, with have a loving intent focus on healing those oppressing us, healing those that hide behind the blue line. And because I don't hate cops. I refuse to hate, right? That's one of my mantras. I refuse to hate Muslims. I refuse to hate Jews. I refuse to hate conspiracy theorists. I refuse to hate Muslims. Did I already say them? I refuse to hate Donald Trump. I refuse to hate the bad guy categorically. Not in a rollover like a victim kind of way, but I'm going to rush them with my magical powers of transcendent healing harder than they can rush at me with their guns. And I'm not alone. I'm not alone in believing this way. I may be alone in speaking out about organizing publicly this way, but I'm not alone with people who will hear this and go, I thought the same thing, and I just thought everybody would think I was crazy for feeling that way, and I didn't know how to start. This is how we start. You are who my audience really is. Whether you started listening to any of my podcast projects because you were curious, because you wanted to argue with me, because you wanted to debunk my claims, or because you already knew what I was going to say, but spirit or a source drew you to it. This is our calling right now, to organize around this, to applaud our brothers and sisters and support our brothers and sisters who are already risking their lives and their livelihood and their well-being on the front lines of all the protests, and join them to the best and fullest of our capacities. I know that there are light workers out there that make a better living than I do, working in a regular, everyday, mundane, normal job. Not to diss on my job. I love my job. But it is what it is, and it doesn't get me to foreign events or international events or nationwide events that I want to go to. It doesn't even get me to LA for the events I want to go to, honestly, because I'd be digging myself a debt hole, more than likely, with just the sheer cost of getting there and getting back and food, because they're profiteering on how we commute places, and they're profiteering on the wear and tear in our cars. When we could be, if the most utopian, and I don't want to be accused, I've been accused of being a utopian, new age hippie woo-woo who's avoiding, a real engagement in a real process. But what I'm saying is, no, it's not escapism. It's let's bring the thunder of our spirituality and bring the evidence of the power of compassionate healing by stepping up to the public microphone, by getting people to run for office who are neither Democrats or Republicans, but spiritualists. And I'm almost way out of time. And the question is, are you that person? If you are, contact me. If you think you know those people, share this at them and get them to contact me. Peace, love, and grooviness be with you.